The crystal glass of champagne felt cold and slippery in my hand, the bubbles inside seeming too cheerful for the heavy dread in my stomach. Across the small, intimate table, my husband Mark smiled his perfect, practiced anniversary smile. 10 years. The soft violin music and the low hum of polite conversation in the expensive restaurant felt like a mockery. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slid the sleek, black folder across the pristine white tablecloth. "I've been working on something in my spare time," I began, my voice barely a whisper over the clinking of silverware. "A full business plan. I want to restart my graphic design firm, properly this time." Mark's smile remained fixed, but it didn't reach his eyes, which had turned cool and assessing. He opened the folder, his gaze quickly scanning the pages I had spent 6 months meticulously preparing. Market research, portfolio samples, financial projections. Then, he laughed. It was a short, harsh sound that made the couple at the next table glance over with curious eyes. He reached out and patted my head, a condescending gesture that made me feel like a child. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice loud and dripping with false affection. "Your little hobby was cute back in the day, but be serious. You're nothing without me and this life I've built for you." The words didn't just hurt. They erased me, reducing a decade of partnership to a one-man show. I felt the scorching heat of humiliation rush to my cheeks as the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, staring at the woman who was nothing. The drive home was a silence so heavy it pressed on my eardrums. I stared out the window at the blur of city lights, feeling completely numb, hollowed out. Mark hummed along to the classical music on the radio, his fingers tapping the steering wheel, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the center of my world. At home, the silence grew louder. He went straight to the shower, whistling. His phone, a sleek black rectangle, buzzed on the kitchen counter, lighting up the dim room. A notification glowed on the screen. I never checked his phone. Trust was the foundation I had built our marriage upon, or so I'd foolishly believed. But now, moving as if in a trance, my hands acted on their own. My fingers trembled as I picked up the cold device. It was a confirmation email for a dinner reservation. For tonight. At the same exclusive restaurant we had just left. The name on the reservation made my blood turn to ice water, Mark and Chloe. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. A quick internet search on my own phone revealed Chloe Miller, 24, a recent MBA graduate, and his firm's bright, ambitious new junior partner. Her LinkedIn photo showed a woman with a confident, almost challenging smile, her eyes sharp and knowing. This was not a last-minute business dinner. This was a planned celebration, and I had been the unwitting opening act. A deep, penetrating cold settled deep in my bones, replacing the numbness with a chilling clarity. "I'm not feeling well," I told Mark, my voice hollow and distant. "A migraine is coming on. You should still go to your late meeting. Don't cancel on my account." He feigned concern, his brow furrowing in a convincing display of worry, but I saw the unmistakable flicker of relief in his eyes. The moment the front door clicked shut behind him, the lock turning with a finality that echoed in my soul, I grabbed my tablet. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the password. I opened the home security app one had insisted on installing years ago after a break-in down the street. My heart pounded as I selected the living room camera and turned on the audio feed. First, I heard the key in the lock. Then, her laughter, light, musical, and utterly foreign in our home, followed by his familiar, easy chuckle. She actually bought the sick act? Chloe's voice was sharp, clear, and laced with contempt. "Of course," Mark replied, his tone relaxed. "She's completely dependent. And now she's talking about starting a business again. It's pathetic." I listened, frozen in my kitchen, as they opened a bottle of our best wine, the pop of the cork a sound of celebration. "She's just a decorative wife, Mark," Chloe said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Pretty to look at, good for hosting your parties, but no real substance. You deserve a real partner, someone who can match your ambition." I sat alone in the dark, tears of hot shame and rage tracking down my face as they dissected my inadequacies and mocked my dreams in the home I had poured my heart into making for us. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink that felt like an insult. The initial, gut-wrenching hurt and humiliation slowly baked in the dawn's light into a hard, cold, and surprisingly solid anger. I was not just a decoration. I was the one who, a decade ago, had designed his first company logo on our old kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a thrift store. I was the one who had set up his entire office network and cloud storage system because he was hopeless with technology, always calling me to fix his printer. The admin password, I remembered, was probably still the same, the name of his childhood dog. He'd never thought to remove me. It was an oversight born of sheer arrogance, a belief that I was too insignificant to pose a threat. I went to my old laptop, buried in a closet under winter blankets. I plugged it in, the familiar startup chime a sound from a past life. My hands, which had trembled just hours before, were now perfectly steady. I typed in the web address for his company's cloud portal. I entered my old username and password. The screen blinked, hesitated for a heart-stopping second, and then I was in. Files, projects, financial records, client databases, a digital map of his entire professional life unfolded before me. I was a ghost in his machine, invisible and all-seeing, and this sterile digital landscape was my new battlefield. A strange, focused calm descended upon me, silencing the screaming in my head. I didn't waste time looking for romantic emails or love letters. That was small-scale betrayal. I went straight for the corporate jugular. I searched for project names, financial folders, anything labeled new or provisional. And I found it, a folder cleverly named Nova Prime, nestled amongst legitimate project files. Inside was a complete, 50-page business proposal for a new, competing real estate development firm. The founding partners were listed as Mark Evans and Chloe Miller. My eyes scanned the executive summary. They planned to systematically poach his current company's biggest clients, using insider information to undercut bids and steal contracts. I found complex spreadsheets detailing the slow, careful siphoning of funds from his main company's operational accounts into new, hidden ones labeled for research and development. They weren't just having an affair. They were executing a carefully planned corporate coup, and our married life, our home, my stability, were all just acceptable collateral damage. This document was the blueprint for their new, shiny empire, and I was slated for demolition. The betrayal felt like a bottomless pit, and I was still falling. I dug deeper into the financial records, my heart a lump of ice in my chest. That's when I found the loan agreement. The number was staggering, a sum so large it made me dizzy, enough to buy a small island. The primary borrower was listed as me. Lena Marie Evans. He had used my name, my identity. The signature was a clumsy imitation of mine, a forgery that didn't capture the slight slant I'd had since college. My eyes, trained from years of reviewing design proofs, scanned the dense, terrifying fine print, and my stomach dropped through the floor. He had used our house, the home I had painstakingly decorated, gardened in, and filled with a decade of memories, as the sole collateral. He had gambled the very roof over my head on his shiny new future with Chloe. If Nova Prime failed, or even stumbled, the bank would take everything from me. He had knowingly, deliberately, signed my name to my own financial destruction. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it, the utter disregard for my well-being, finally stole the air from my lungs, and I gasped, alone in the silent house. I couldn't breathe. The beautiful, spacious, sun-drenched rooms of our house, once a source of pride, now felt like a gilded prison, the walls closing in. I stumbled to my phone, my vision blurry with unshed tears of rage. I scrolled through my contacts, past the numbers of mutual friends and his family, and pressed the name I hadn't dialed in over 2 years, my sister, Amanda. She was a fiercely successful divorce attorney, a warrior in a tailored suit. Mark had always called her aggressive and dramatic, and over time, worn down by his subtle criticisms, I'd let the distance between us grow. She answered on the second ring. Lena? Is everything okay? Her voice, familiar and strong, broke the last dam holding back my emotions. I choked out the whole, sordid story between heaving sobs: the anniversary dinner, the reservation, the security audio, the cloud files, the business plan, the forged loan. There was a heavy, processing silence on the other end. I could almost hear her sharp legal mind working, piecing the timeline together, recognizing the patterns of a sinking ship. Then her voice came through, clear and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. Okay, Lena. Listen to me. Stop crying. Tears won't fix this. We are going to burn his kingdom to the ground. We will not leave a single brick standing for them to build on. Now, here's what you're going to do. Amanda's instructions were crystal clear. I had to become a spy in my own home. I had to act normal, be the sweet, dependent wife he expected. My new job was to document everything. That night, I created a new, heavily password-protected folder on a separate, encrypted hard drive. I named it Project Phoenix. The first file I saved was a high-resolution screenshot of the forged loan document. I began a detailed, daily log, a digital diary of evidence. I recorded dates, times, amounts, and direct quotes from the emails and audio files. I saved every incriminating email, every suspicious financial record, and every audio clip in multiple locations. This was no longer a personal diary of a heartbroken woman. It was a legal weapon, meticulously crafted. Every time Mark smiled at me over morning coffee, every time he absent-mindedly kissed my cheek before leaving for work, I thought of my growing folder, my secret arsenal. It was my source of power, my anchor in the churning sea of his lies, the thing that kept me from drowning. About a week later, Mark came home with a somber, concerned expression, the one he used when discussing stock market dips with nervous clients. The market is turning, Lena, he said with a heavy, put-upon sigh. Some of our investments are underperforming. We need to be prudent. I'm implementing some belt-tightening measures for the household. He handed me a plain, basic blue debit card. Use this for groceries and household expenses from now on. I'll transfer a weekly allowance. Then, methodically, he took my platinum credit cards, the ones I'd used for a decade to manage our home, buy his birthday presents, and handle emergencies. It's temporary, he assured me, his hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture that now felt possessive, not comforting. Just until this big Nova Prime deal closes. It was a calculated move to increase my financial dependence, to make me feel the weight of his control and my own powerlessness. He wanted me to feel poor and trapped. I simply nodded, my face a mask of quiet, worried acceptance. I understand, dear, I said softly, looking down at the cheap piece of plastic in my hand. We all have to make sacrifices. Let him believe his puppet was still perfectly on its strings. My design skills, however, were mine alone, a part of my soul he could never touch or monetize. From my old laptop, using a public Wi-Fi signal, I created a comprehensive freelance profile under the name Eleanor Gray. I used an anonymous, encrypted email service and a new, separate bank account Amanda had helped me open under my maiden name. I started diligently looking for clients. My first target was a promising, venture capital-backed tech startup. I cross-referenced their name with the Nova Prime client target list. They were squarely on it. I sent them a polished portfolio of my best work in a compelling, competitive proposal. My rates were aggressively low for the quality I offered. They hired Eleanor Gray on the spot. I delivered sleek, professional branding and a stunning website interface faster than they had thought possible. I had just anonymously stolen Mark's future client, using the very talent he had mocked. It was a small, silent victory, a single pinprick in his inflated ego, but it tasted sweeter than the most expensive champagne. My nightly raids into the company cloud, conducted from the privacy of my walk-in closet, yielded a much bigger, more dangerous prize. I found a folder of heavily encrypted emails between Mark and a city councilman, William Briggs. It took me 3 long nights, fueled by cold coffee and colder fury, but I finally cracked the password. It was Chloe's birthday followed by an exclamation mark. The emails were a masterclass in corruption, detailing a consulting fee, a massive, six-figure sum, in exchange for the councilman's favorable vote on a crucial zoning permit for the flagship Nova Prime project. This was no longer just about money or marital infidelity. This was bribery. A serious felony. The stakes had just skyrocketed from financial ruin to potential federal prison time. My hands were steady, my focus absolute as I meticulously saved every email, every bank transfer record, every veiled threat and promise. The fear was gone, burned away and replaced by a cold, purifying fury. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a criminal, and I had the proof. Mark started to seem genuinely agitated, the polished calm he usually wore beginning to crack. Small, inexplicable setbacks in his Nova Prime plans were adding up, creating friction. One evening, he looked at me across our expensive, rarely used dining table, his expression all business. "We need to think about liquidating some non-essential assets," he announced, as if discussing stock options. "That antique jewelry collection your mother left you, it's not doing any good sitting in a bank safe deposit box. The gold and stones alone are worth a fortune. We could get a significant amount for it to reinvest." The jewelry was my most sacred possession, my last tangible link to my mother, who had passed away 5 years ago. He knew its profound emotional value. This was a deliberate test of my subservience, to see how far he could push me. I met his gaze, my expression neutral, almost bored. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice even and devoid of emotion. "It's a waste to have it locked away, gathering dust. We should get it professionally appraised next week." His face lit up with a greedy, relieved smile, his shoulders relaxing. He didn't even flinch. He saw only a liquid asset, not the last pieces of my shattered heart. I knew I needed eyes and ears inside his office, someone who could provide real-time intelligence. I thought immediately of Barbara, his longtime secretary. She was in her 60s, fiercely loyal to Mark, but she was also a woman of principle with a strong, unshakable moral compass. Using the same public library computer, I created a new, completely untraceable email account. I sent a single, stark email to her work address with the subject line, "A concerned citizen." The body contained no text, only attached screenshots of expense reports Chloe had filed over the past 6 months, 5-star hotels in Paris, first-class flights to Tokyo, receipts for lavish, romantic dinners for 2, all meticulously marked as client development and business outreach. The amounts were obscene. The note below read simply, "Is this how the company's money should be spent? Ask her about the client meeting at the Ritz that coincided with her birthday." I was planting a single seed of righteous indignation in the most fertile ground possible. I prayed it would grow into a full-blown mutiny. My freelance work as Eleanor Gray was quickly gaining a stellar reputation for quality, reliability, and innovation. I worked tirelessly, late into the night, the glow of my laptop screen my only companion. Through a network of online freelancers, I heard a persistent rumor about a reclusive, mega-wealthy investor named Arthur Claymore. He was looking to fund a large, state-of-the-art, eco-friendly residential complex. It was the spitting image of the main project described in the Nova Prime proposal. I spent 72 almost sleepless hours crafting a stunning, comprehensive branding package for the concept, logos, color palettes, marketing copy, and virtual mock-ups, and sent it to his representatives. They were deeply impressed. He agreed to a confidential meeting with the visionary creative director behind the work. I suggested, ever so helpfully, that he might also want to hear quick pitches from other established local firms for comparison, including my husband's company, Evans Development. I made absolutely certain Mark and Chloe received a golden, embossed invitation, positioning it as the opportunity of a lifetime. The trap was meticulously baited and set. They walked into the conference room, hungry, confident, and utterly oblivious, ready to land the deal that would cement their future together. The meeting was held in a sterile, modern conference room on the top floor of the city's newest skyscraper, all glass and steel with a breathtaking, panoramic view. I arrived early, wearing a severe, impeccably tailored black designer suit I'd bought with my secret earnings. I stood with my back to the door, looking out at the city that had been my home, my prison, and was now becoming my stage. I heard them enter, Mark's smooth, confident voice filling the room as he greeted Mr. Claymore's assistant, followed by Chloe's tinkling, assured laugh. Then, the assistant said, "Ah, excellent. Everyone is here. Let me introduce you to the mastermind behind our project's entire vision, Eleanor Gray." I turned around slowly, deliberately. The look on Mark's face was a masterpiece of pure, unadulterated shock. His jaw went slack. His skin paled to a sickly white, then flushed a deep, blotchy red of dawning horror. Chloe's polished smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, venomous confusion as her eyes darted from me to Mark and back again. "You?" Mark finally choked out, the word a strangled whisper. I offered a small, cold, professional smile, the kind I'd seen him give to incompetent contractors. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice cool and cutting through the tense air. "However, after a preliminary review of your submitted materials, we found your proposal to be structurally derivative and financially unsound. We will not be proceeding with your firm. Good day." The chaos that erupted behind the scenes was instant and beautiful in its destructive symmetry. Barbara, my now devoted ally, began forwarding me their internal emails in real time. The flawless partnership shattered like glass. "You must have leaked our financials," Mark accused Chloe in a blistering email. "This is your fault. Your carelessness in the office." Chloe fired back within minutes, "My fault? You're the one married to a scheming snake. How did she even know about this meeting? How did she get this client?" Their alliance, built on the weak sand of greed and shared ambition, crumbled into dust under the slightest pressure. They turned on each other with the same ferocity they had once reserved for plotting their future. They were so busy looking for a traitor in their own midst, they never once saw the ghost in the machine, the silent architect of their downfall, patiently pulling every string from the shadows. I read their panicked, hate-filled words from the quiet solitude of my home, a deep, quiet satisfaction warming me from the inside out, a feeling more potent than any drug. It was time to topple the king from his throne for good. I compiled a comprehensive digital package containing all the evidence of the bribe, the incriminating emails, the encrypted messages, the clear bank transfer records. Using a secure, anonymous server at the public library, I sent it directly to Councilman Briggs's most vocal political opponent, a woman named Evelyn Reed, who was famously known for her integrity and zero tolerance for corruption. I knew she would not sit on it. Her career was built on holding people accountable. Within 48 hours, it was the lead story on every local news channel, the headline screaming from the screen, "Bribery Scandal Rocks City Hall, Prominent Developer Implicated." Mark's name and his company's name were splashed across the screen, the news anchor's voices grave. The dominoes were not just falling, they were creating an avalanche, each piece of evidence crashing down with more force than the last. I watched the news report on the small television in my kitchen, a single, hard, unforgiving smile on my face. The first flames were now visibly licking at the fortified gates of his kingdom, and there was no one to put them out. The phone in our house became an instrument of relentless torture, ringing incessantly from dawn until late into the night. Angry, frightened investors demanding explanations. Anxious business partners backpedaling, trying to save themselves. Then, the final, fateful call came from the bank. They were calling in the entire fraudulent loan immediately, citing the significant reputational risk and the ongoing criminal investigation as grounds for immediate default. Mark became a frantic, caged animal, pacing the length of his home office, screaming into his phone, his tie loose and his hair disheveled. He ran to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard, trying to wire every last cent from our joint savings and checking accounts to cover the massive payment. The transaction failed. A red error message flashed on the screen. On Amanda's expert advice, I had legally frozen all our joint accounts that very morning, citing the fraudulent activity and forging of my signature. He was completely locked out. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the screen, finally understanding the totality of his entrapment. The powerful, always in control man was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered boy, watching his entire world implode in slow, agonizing motion. He stormed into the living room where I sat calmly reading a book, his eyes wild and bloodshot, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. "You," he screamed, spittle flying from his lips, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at me. "You did this. You ruined me. You destroyed everything I've ever worked for. Everything I built." I closed my book, marked my page, and stood up from the sofa, my posture straight, my hands calm at my sides. I looked at him, really looked at the man I had loved, and felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. "You told me I was nothing without you," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through his hysterical rage like a knife. "You said my dreams were a silly hobby. You called me a decorative wife, a pretty accessory. You forged my name and gambled my home, the one thing that was truly mine. So I used the very things you called nothing. I used my design skill to systematically take your clients. I used the technology you forgot I had to find your crimes. I am not nothing, Mark. You just needed me to believe I was so you could feel like a king. But you were never a king. You were just a man, and a very, very small one at that." The next day, in the quiet, imposing silence of Amanda's law office, a room that smelled of old books and power, we laid out the terms of his surrender. She slid the thick stack of divorce papers across the polished mahogany table. The conditions were stark, brutal, and non-negotiable. The house would be signed over to me, free and clear of any debt. He would transfer a substantial, pre-agreed sum from his remaining, non-frozen personal assets to my account within 24 hours. Most importantly, he would accept full, legal, and financial responsibility for the forged loan, absolving me of all liability. In return, we offered him a single, stark choice, a lifeline to the barest semblance of a future. Amanda placed a small, black data drive on the table between us. "This contains all the primary evidence against Councilman Briggs," she stated, her voice cool and devoid of emotion. "You will take this to the district attorney. You will testify for the prosecution, fully and truthfully. You do that, and you might avoid a long-term prison sentence. It's the only deal you will get. Take it or leave it." He looked from her stern, unyielding face to my calm, resolved one, his own a mask of stunned, total defeat. He had no leverage, no options, no escape routes left. He was checkmated. We met one last time in his now barren office. The expensive abstract art was gone from the walls, the shelves were empty of awards and family photos, the room echoing with a hollow silence. He sat behind his massive, expensive desk, a shell of the arrogant man he once was, drowning in a sea of his own making. The pen looked comically small and insignificant in his hand. He looked up at me, and for a fleeting, unguarded moment, I saw not anger or blame, but a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He finally saw me. Not the supportive wife, not the decorative accessory, but the strategist, the survivor, the intellectual equal he had spent a decade trying to diminish and control. He saw the sharp intelligence and fierce strength he had worked so hard to smother. He saw, with terrifying clarity, that I was, and had always been, his equal, no, his superior. He scrawled his signature on the final page, the sound of the pen a dull, definitive scratch in the quiet, empty room. He had lost his wife, his home, his fortune, and his reputation. All he had left was the chance to stay out of a cage, a freedom that would always feel like a prison. The public fall was merciless and thorough. The news stories detailed his plea deal, his testimony that painted him as a corrupt, willing participant in the bribery scheme. He was still convicted on multiple, lesser counts of fraud and conspiracy. He was now a convicted felon. His name became synonymous with scandal and corruption in the local business community, a cautionary tale. Chloe, I learned from a final email from Barbara, had vanished weeks before the sentencing, taking what little cash was left in the Nova Prime accounts and disappearing to another state, leaving no forwarding address. The business section of the newspaper ran a lengthy feature with the damning headline, "The Meteoric Ascent and Crashing Burn of Mark Evans." There was a grainy, unflattering photo of him leaving the courthouse, his shoulders hunched against the rain, his face aged a decade, hunted and alone. The world now saw him for the fragile, fraudulent man he truly was. There was no path back from this self-inflicted ruin, no redemption arc waiting in the wings. I stood in the sunlit, airy room that had once been my private escape, a place for reading and painting. Now, it was the official, bustling headquarters of Phoenix Creative, my very own graphic design firm. The walls were painted a warm, buttery yellow. My original art degree and the awards I'd won early in my career, long since boxed away, were now proudly displayed in sleek frames. My first major clients were the powerful contacts I'd made as Eleanor Gray, including the formidable Arthur Claymore, who respected my raw grit and determination as much as my professional talent. They had no idea of the brutal, silent war I had fought and won. They only saw the formidable, capable, and fiercely independent professional I had always been, finally unleashed. My business was not just successful, it was thriving, built on a rock-solid foundation of my own hard work, integrity, and vision. I had truly, finally, risen from the ashes of his betrayal, stronger, wiser, and more brilliant than I had ever been before. Almost a year to the day after the divorce was finalized, I ran into an old acquaintance from the country club at a grocery store. Over a brief, awkward conversation in the coffee aisle, she mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she'd heard through a mutual friend that Mark was living in a small, rural town 2 states away. He was working as an assistant manager at a local building supply store, a humdrum job with no prestige. He rented a small, cramped apartment above a detached garage. She said he looked tired, weathered, and had completely lost the confident, magnetic swagger that had once defined him. He never once tried to call or write to me. He never sent a letter of apology. I thought hearing about his mundane misery would bring me a surge of joy, but instead, I felt a profound, simple emptiness, like the quiet after a storm has passed. I realized then, with absolute certainty, that I didn't need his apology. His pathetic, shrunken life was not my triumph. My beautiful, successful, vibrant, and fiercely independent life was my triumph. His existence was his own consequence. My existence was my hard-won victory. I stood on the wide, private balcony of my new penthouse apartment, a space I had designed from the concrete slabs up, every finish, every piece of furniture a reflection of my own taste and spirit. The city sprawled magnificently below me, a glittering, endless tapestry of light and life and possibility. The night air was clean and cool on my skin. My sister, Amanda, joined me, handing me a flute of bubbling champagne. She clinked her glass gently against mine, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride, love, and shared relief. We didn't toast to revenge or his downfall. We toasted to new beginnings. To resilience. To the unbreakable bond of family. To a future I had built with my own 2 hands, my own sharp mind, and my own unbreakable spirit, a future with no limits. I looked out at the endless, star-dusted horizon, a deep, unwavering peace settling in my soul, a feeling of being whole, complete, and finally, entirely free. He said I was nothing without him. But I was, and always had been, absolutely everything.